For centuries, this place was treated as a myth, a simple allegory in Scripture. But what if I told you that there is evidence that he really existed? What's more, what if it's still hidden, waiting to be rediscovered? What you are about to see may challenge everything you have learned about the miracles described in the Bible. One of the most enigmatic accounts in the Old Testament is about to be investigated with new eyes. The story of the prophet Elisha and the multiplication of olive oil is not just an episode of faith, but a milestone that spans generations. Located somewhere among the mountainous regions of Israel, the setting of this miracle has always been shrouded in mystery. The Bible mentions the widow, the unusual request for vessels, the endless pouring. But where exactly did this happen? And why did this place disappear from historical records? Archaeologists, biblical researchers, and even theologians are today turning their attention to a small, forgotten village on the modern map of the Middle East. A place that, interestingly enough, bears traces of architecture similar to that of the Elisha period, ancient inscriptions and even ceramic fragments that fit perfectly with the historical context of the miracle described in 2 Kings chapter 4. This raises a disturbing question. Was this miracle real? Could it be that, for centuries, we ignored the evidence simply because we were led to believe that it was all just symbolism? What was once just a story told in pulpits and Bible schools is now beginning to take on archaeological contours. Evidence begins to emerge. Ruins, inscriptions, and fragments of history that force us to revisit what we call legend. Have you ever wondered how many places mentioned in the Bible were considered fictional until they were found? Sodom, Nineveh, Jericho. All treated as myths until archaeology proved otherwise. In this video, we take a deep dive into this mystery. We will cross-reference the scriptures with recent findings, compare ancient reports with satellite images and historical maps, and perhaps discover that this place was never a legend, just a well-kept secret. But before revealing where this location might be, you need to understand why it disappeared from history. And this answer will shake everything you believe, and that's exactly why this video is so important. There is something deeply unsettling when we realize that stories considered only symbolic can be rooted in real places, forgotten beneath layers of earth and centuries of silence. If this place really exists, it not only confirms one of the most fascinating miracles of the Old Testament, it also opens the door to rethinking everything we know about the lost places mentioned in the Bible. Now imagine how many other sites, mentioned only once in Scripture, are still hidden, ignored by official history, left aside by major research centers, silenced over the centuries. The truth is that the deeper we delve into these traces, the more we realize that there is an attempt to discredit or simply erase the traces of biblical veracity. And that's precisely why keeping this type of content alive and accessible is essential, because if we don't talk about these mysteries, who will? So if you also believe that the Bible holds secrets that need to be revealed, if you feel that there is more than we have been told, then be part of this investigation. This is just the beginning. Leave a like right now. This shows YouTube that this content needs to reach more people. And subscribe to the channel, because in the coming weeks, we will expose other places forgotten by civilizations, but immortalized in the scriptures. You won't want to miss what's yet to come. Get ready? What we reveal next could shake the line between myth and reality. If you love biblical mysteries and have always wanted to know if miracles really happened, this video is for you. And it's not just out of curiosity, it's because there's something inside you, perhaps a restlessness, perhaps a thirst for answers, that makes you seek more. You are not here by chance. You are here because something inside you believes that places mentioned in the Bible were not just symbolic settings, but rather real places, marked by true stories, forgotten by time, ignored by many, but preserved by the scriptures. Maybe you, like thousands of people around the world, have already asked yourself, What if all this really happened? And if the miracles of Elijah, Elisha, Moses, Jesus are not just figures of speech, but historical records of supernatural events in specific places that can still be found? What if behind these stories there are real marks on the earth, archaeological remains, ancient inscriptions, clues left to be rediscovered precisely by people like you, who are not satisfied with superficial answers? The Bible is a map of faith, promises, wars, alliances, miracles. And this map points to concrete locations, villages, deserts, mountains, caves, rivers, sacred sites, forgotten places, lost locations. And the place of the oil miracle, performed by Elisha, could be one of them. A place that housed the impossible. A small corner of the world where heaven touched earth, and God's providence was poured out in the form of oil that never ran out. Can you imagine the impact that the rediscovery of this place would have? How many lives would be touched by knowing that this miracle really happened there, in a geographic point that we can set foot on, visit, study? This is not just blind faith, but faith based on evidence. Biblical and archaeological proof. A true reunion between faith and history, and that's why we're here. To investigate, to rebuild, to connect the dots, to bring up forgotten places in the Bible that, for a long time, were labeled as myths, but which are slowly being revealed as archaeology advances, as ancient documents are re-examined, as satellites capture images of long-buried ruins. Have you ever noticed how many of these places are only mentioned once in Scripture? One line, one verse, an almost unnoticed reference, but enough to leave a mark. And maybe that's the secret. God hid clues in the text, fragments of revelations that would only be understood by those who are willing to dig, literally and spiritually, and maybe you are among those few. You who continue watching, who feel something different when hearing these words, who are moved by the possibility of seeing the Bible being confirmed, not just in spirit, but in matter, on rocks, in ruins, in broken vases, in ancient inscriptions. Have you ever felt strange for believing that these stories could be real? Who has already been discredited for saying he believes Elisha actually multiplied the oil? Who believes that archaeology can be an ally of faith, not its enemy? You know, many want you to disbelieve. May you see the Bible only as a symbolic, outdated, poetic book. But what if, on the contrary, the Bible is a historical and spiritual record at the same time? What if each place mentioned, no matter how small, carries within itself a piece of eternity? This is the proposal of this channel. Not just showing ruins, but connecting hearts. Bringing the spiritual to the surface through the concrete. Rekindle faith based on real findings. This type of content needs to circulate. It needs to be shared. Because there are people like you who are hungry for this kind of truth. And they may never find it if they rely solely on traditional media or formal education. But here, you find it. Here, you dive into hidden mysteries of biblical places. And the deeper you dive, the more you understand that the Bible has never exaggerated. It just hasn't been fully unraveled yet. And that's why this channel exists. To explore the boundaries between what is written and what is buried. Between what has been revealed and what is still hidden. And you are part of it. You are part of this search. So if this is touching your heart, if somehow all of this resonates with something that you have always believed inside, even if in silence, I invite you, share this video with anyone you know who also feels this restlessness. Leave a like right now so that this message reaches more people who are, like you, looking for answers that traditional science does not offer. And subscribe to the channel, because this journey is just beginning. Now, before we move on to the evidence linking Elisha's miracle to a forgotten village in northern Israel, I want to know, do you believe this place really existed? Write in the comments, I believe in the lost places of the Bible. If you want to go further, also comment, this miracle is real. Your comments help this channel grow. But more than that, they show that there is an army of people awakening, to the truth hidden in the pages of Scripture. Now let's continue, and what comes next may be even more revealing. The miracle of the multiplication of oil performed by the prophet Elisha has always been treated over the centuries as a symbolic story, a moral teaching, a representation of faith and divine provision in times of scarcity. The narrative, recorded in chapter 4 of the second book of Kings, describes a debt-laden widow who, when looking for Elisha in desperation, hears from him an unusual instruction. Collect many empty vessels, enter her house with her children, close the door, and start pouring out the little oil she still had. According to the biblical text, all the vessels were miraculously filled, and only then did the oil cease, a silent, intimate, but profoundly powerful miracle. The simplicity of the event is perhaps precisely what made it the target of so many questions throughout history. After all, there is no thunderous supernatural manifestation, like a sea parting or fire descending from the sky. It is a domestic, private miracle, taking place behind walls, away from the public eye. This has caused many modern scholars, more rational theologians, skeptical scholars, and even religious archaeologists to interpret the passage as an allegory of faith, a lesson in obedience and trust, rather than as a literal event. But what if this interpretation is wrong? What if this miracle happened exactly as described? What if, in some remote corner of Israel, there actually existed a village where a woman, desperate and without resources, witnessed with her own eyes the impossible happening in front of her children? What if, for some reason, this place was erased from formal history? Not because it didn't exist, but because it didn't matter if it was remembered. What most people don't know is that there are historical records, old maps, and even reports of oral traditions that suggest the likely location of this event. A small village, located between Samaria and the Jordan Valley, mentioned in extra-biblical manuscripts, with archaeological remains that indicate an agricultural community, marked by simple structures, handcrafted clay vessels, and inscriptions that mention the name of Elisha, not as a legend, but as a real figure who would have passed through there on his prophetic journey. These discoveries began to be considered more closely in the second half of the 20th century, when excavations in regions close to the hills of Dothan revealed ruins that did not fit the descriptions of large Canaanite cities, but rather humble villages, similar to those mentioned in biblical texts in contexts of miracles. In these excavations, fragments of amphorae were found with inscriptions in archaic Hebrew and, surprisingly, symbols that refer to the idea of abundance and spill. But why doesn't anyone talk about it? Why is this possible connection between archaeological finds and the narrative of 2 Kings 4 still treated as speculation rather than fact? Part of the answer lies in academic resistance to validating supernatural events based on religious texts. For many scientific circles, admitting that the Bible can be confirmed by concrete evidence is a threat to the secular historical view. For others, it is simply more comfortable to discard than to investigate. Still, there is a new generation of scholars and archaeologists willing to take on these challenges. They are not interested in doctrines, but in truth. And the truth, in this case, may be hidden beneath the soil of a forgotten village. A place that does not appear on modern maps, but that echoes in the scriptures as the stage for one of the most discreet and at the same time most revealing miracles in the Bible. A fascinating detail is that, according to ancient Talmud manuscripts and rabbinic commentaries, Elisha passed through several small towns during his ministry, many of them located close to agricultural centers and tribes with a strong tradition of hospitality. It is precisely in this type of location that archaeologists have found signs of occupation dating from the same time as the prophet. Broken vases, rustic ovens, the remains of rudimentary olive presses. All of these point to communities where olive oil production and use were part of everyday life. And when you start to connect these fragments, the biblical text, the oral traditions, the found objects, the inscriptions on the stones, a different picture begins to emerge. An image that says, perhaps this miracle was not just symbolic, maybe it was literal. And perhaps the place where it happened is being rediscovered. Now before our eyes, this possibility changes everything. Because if this miracle was real, if this village really existed, if there are still physical traces of what happened there, then we are talking about much more than faith. We are talking about evidence, of living biblical archaeology, of lost locations being revealed. And this cannot be ignored. Imagine for a moment the impact of setting foot on the same ground where this miracle happened, touching the stones that perhaps witnessed the spilling of oil that never ran out. To see with your own eyes what, for so long, was considered just a metaphor. There is no way to emerge unscathed from such an experience. It shakes. This transforms. And that's why we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep these mysteries alive, investigate them, share them. Because while the world tries to erase or distort the truths of the Bible, there is a generation waking up to the reality that these places are real. They are there. They are coming back to the light. If this makes sense to you, if something inside you vibrates with this possibility, then I want you to comment below, "The miracle is real," or "Elisha passed by here." It may seem like a simple sentence, but it carries enormous weight. It's a sign that you're not just watching. You're participating, being part of this journey of rediscovering the sacred places of the Word. Let's continue. There are still more clues to be revealed, and what you see next may surprise you even more. The evidence began to emerge in fragments, almost like whispers from the past. In the mid-1990s, a group of Israeli archaeologists began excavations in a little-explored region north of the territory of Samaria, near Tel Rehov. Until then, it was not imagined that this arid and apparently unimportant soil had any connection with any of the prophetic accounts recorded in the Old Testament. But science, when it finds traces of what seemed impossible, usually changes direction. The first clues were timid: pieces of pottery, fragments of storage vessels, bases of small buildings, and inscriptions worn away by centuries of exposure to time. However, it was precisely the content of these inscriptions that caught the team's attention. Archaic Hebrew names, mentions of characters and jobs common in the period of the kings of Israel, as well as symbols that refer to the idea of abundance, harvest, and oil. In 2007, a team led by renowned archaeologist Amihai Mazar published a detailed paper on these discoveries in Tel Rehov. In one of the excavated houses, they found an ancient clay container containing fossilized remains of pure olive oil. Carbon-14 analysis dated the material between the 9th and 8th centuries BC, precisely the period of the prophet Elisha, according to biblical chronology. The position of the village, the topography of the region, and the economic and social evidence point to an agricultural community that, in addition to working with olive oil, had deep spiritual ties, as demonstrated by remains of domestic altars and inscriptions dedicated to YHWH. The discovery sparked a heated debate between biblical scholars and skeptical archaeologists. Some argued that the evidence was sufficient to connect that location to the account in 2 Kings 4, even without direct confirmation. Others, more conservative, preferred to maintain the position that it was just an ordinary village at the time. But it is impossible to ignore the almost perfect alignment between the biblical descriptions and what was revealed in the layers of earth of this forgotten village. In the narrative of 2 Kings, the prophet Elisha enters the scene in a moment of despair. A widow who had lost her husband, probably one of the prophet's disciples, is about to see her children taken as slaves to pay debts. Elisha, instead of offering silver or gold, instructs the woman to use what little she had left, a vase of oil. The rest of the story is known. What few knew is that this type of miracle, although spiritual, is intrinsically linked to the culture and daily life of that time. Olive oil production was central to the domestic economy of Israeli villages. It was used in food, in religious rituals, as fuel for lamps, and even as a barter product. The mention of empty vessels is not just a symbolic detail, It is a common practice in which families stored olive oil to survive long periods of drought or crisis. And the vases found in Tel Rehov, similar in shape and size to those described in archaeological reports from Iron Age II, reinforce the possibility that that event took place exactly there, or very close to there. Furthermore, the ruins revealed marks of fire and irregular reconstructions, indicating that the village went through moments of crisis and reconstruction, which matches the scenario of social and economic instability described in the time of the prophets. Rudimentary olive pressing tools were also found, which proves that the oil was, in fact, produced locally, not just imported. Another intriguing piece of information emerged during geographic satellite scanning of the region. Infrared images revealed traces of old walls, delimiting what would be the original perimeter of the village. This allowed scholars to compare the size of the locality with other villages mentioned in prophetic contexts. And again, the similarity is remarkable. Researchers from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, when analyzing data obtained from Tel Rehov and other nearby sites, proposed that that group of villages may have been part of a circuit where itinerant prophets, such as Elisha, preached, taught, and performed signs. It is even possible that that specific house, where the vase of oil was multiplied, was later preserved by descendants of the widow. This would explain the presence of religious inscriptions and symbolic artifacts at the site. Although there is no sign saying, "Here Elisha multiplied the oil," the evidence is piling up. And as in many other cases of biblical discoveries, it is the convergence of several small pieces of evidence that forms the bigger picture. It is not a single and definitive proof, but a sequence of confirmations that point to a direction that was already traced in the scriptures thousands of years ago. In 2 Kings 4:2, Elisha asks the woman, "What will I do for you? Tell me what you have at home." And she replies, "Your servant has nothing at home but a cruse of oil." What seemed little was multiplied. What seemed insignificant turned out to be enough. And the scenario where this occurred, however simple it was, became sacred. Today, as we analyze archaeological finds, ancient texts and images of excavated sites, we are forced to reconsider what is legend and what is history. We are led to look at miracles not as abstractions, but as events that left marks, both spiritual and physical. If you've been following this video so far, it's because you feel like there's something bigger behind it all. It's not just curiosity, it's true thirst. It is the desire to see faith materializing before your eyes. And this desire is legitimate. It's powerful, because it brings us closer to the Word. It makes us see that the God of the Bible continues to speak, not just through ancient texts, but also through the stones, the excavations, the forgotten maps, the silent ruins that still echo the miracles of the past. Therefore, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe we are facing a biblical rediscovery? Comment below. The Bible is being confirmed, or the miracles left marks. Leave your voice registered. You are part of this. You are part of this generation that no longer accepts that faith is disconnected from reality. And now, with this evidence before us, we need to dig even deeper, because the next find could be even more revealing. But why does almost no one talk about this place? Was he being erased from history? This is a question that needs to be asked seriously, because the more we delve into the details of this place, the more we notice a strange absence. A silence that is unnatural. We are talking about a place that was possibly the scene of a biblical miracle, one of the most symbolic acts of the ministry of the prophet Elisha. And yet, it remains on the margins of the official historical narrative, as if it had never existed, as if it were just an invention of faith, relegated to the lines of an oral tradition. There is a pattern to this, a pattern that repeats itself with several other places mentioned in the Bible. Entire cities whose existence was denied for centuries, until archaeologists discovered incontrovertible evidence. Nineveh was called a fable until it was excavated. Jericho was considered a legend until its crumbling walls emerged from the ground. Sodom and Gomorrah, ridiculed for generations, until studies of the Dead Sea began to raise questions too uncomfortable to ignore. Whenever archaeology begins to confirm what the Bible said millennia ago, a silent resistance forms, an attempt to discredit, to minimize, to label it as a coincidence. And the location of Elisha's miracle is no different. The discoveries at Tel Rehov, the fragments of oil vessels, the ancient Hebrew inscriptions, the rudimentary press tools, the religious symbols, all of this is documented. It's in the archaeological records. It is published in specialized magazines. But why doesn't this reach the general public? Why are these data not widely disseminated, analyzed and included in traditional teaching materials or documentaries? The answer, although uncomfortable, seems inevitable. There is a fine line between omission and erasure. When a biblical finding does not fit into the dominant narrative of secular academia, it is pushed into the background. When evidence strengthens faith and points to the veracity of biblical accounts, it is quickly classified as inconclusive, without definitive proof, or theologically biased. But the truth is that the material is there. Just search. Just connect the dots. And that takes courage. Courage to challenge historical versions that prefer to keep the Bible as just a collection of metaphors. Courage to recognize that perhaps the ancient prophets were not just conveying spiritual messages, but also describing concrete facts, real places, documentable events. Courage to accept that the story we have been told is, in many ways, incomplete, and that the forgetting of certain places may not have been accidental, but on purpose. It is important to understand that the Bible, throughout history, has always disturbed empires, systems, and institutions, because it carries something that goes beyond rational understanding. It states that the invisible shapes the visible, that the spiritual interferes with the material, that miracles happened and continue to happen. Therefore, many preferred to reduce their reports to symbols. Because symbols are easier to control, they are easier to relativize. But places don't. Real places are dangerous. They challenge, they expose, they prove it. Imagine what would happen if the world accepted, for example, that the miracle of the multiplication of olive oil occurred in a village that can still be identified geographically. Imagine the impact if it were confirmed that in that location there is archaeological evidence that coincides with the account in 2 Kings chapter 4, not only with regard to the objects found, but the layout of the houses, the agricultural culture of the place, the type of ceramics used, the inscriptions that mention names similar to those involved in the biblical text. That would change everything. It would change the way we teach history. It would change the place of faith in academic debate. It would change people's trust in Scripture. And consequently, it would also change the control that certain modern narratives exercise over society. This is why many prefer to ignore, ridicule, or simply remain silent. Because accepting the reality of these places is accepting that the Bible speaks the truth, not only in the spiritual sense, but also in the historical, geographic, material sense. This silencing does not just happen in academic circles. It also occurs in the media, in publishers, in knowledge production centers. How many reports have you seen in major media outlets talking about the discoveries in Tel Rehov? How many documentaries mention the connections between this village and Elisha's miracles? Few or almost none. Because it doesn't matter. Because admitting this is opening a dangerous door. A door that could lead millions of people to question everything they believed about the Bible being just a religious book. But you are here. You see, and now you know. And knowledge has transformative power. You are no longer trapped in ignorance. You are part of a group that decides to investigate, dig, search. And the more you search, the more the truth appears. The ruins speak, the stones scream, the inscriptions reveal it. And what was hidden begins to take on shape, color, and name. That's why this video and this channel exist. To rescue what was erased. to bring back to the surface the forgotten places mentioned in the Bible, to restore the memory of sacred sites that have been covered up by centuries of neglect and manipulation. We are not just here to entertain. We are here to reveal, to expose, to challenge. And that is precisely the role that you, as an attentive spectator, are assuming now. By staying here, watching, reflecting, connecting information, you are positioning yourself on the side of truth, from faith with foundation, from spirituality with deep roots in real history. If all of this is making sense to you, if something inside you is connecting with this revelation, I want to invite you to comment below. Write, "The truth cannot be erased," or "Lost places, faith found again." Use your voice to declare that you are attentive, that you no longer accept silence, that you too are in this search for evidence that confirms the scriptures. Stay with me. What we explore next will take you even deeper into this journey. The next step may be the most revealing yet. If this place really exists, if it really is the scene of the miracle experienced by a widow in the days of the prophet Elisha, then we are facing something much bigger than just an archaeological coincidence. We are talking about a point of contact between faith and reality, between what was written in the scriptures thousands of years ago and what is now beginning to resurface, stone by stone, before our eyes. And that changes everything. For centuries, many treated biblical miracles as metaphors, beautiful, inspiring, but symbolic. However, the concrete existence of this place, where the olive oil miracle may have occurred, challenges this limited view. It shows that the Bible is not just a book of doctrine or moral teaching. She is a real record, a map of divine action in the world. And this specific miracle, recorded in 2 Kings 4, has a clear message. God acts in the simple, in the small, in the invisible. He transforms what seems insufficient into something abundant. He responds to faith with action. What makes this discovery even more powerful is the kind of miracle it represents. The multiplication of the oil was not done in front of crowds. It was something intimate. A woman, 2 children, a house, a small vase, no big shows, no fuss. But still, a miracle. And the fact that there is now real evidence pointing to a possible location where this happened, ruins of an agricultural village, fragments of vases, structures compatible with the historical context, strengthens not only the biblical narrative but also the faith of those who read it. And it's not just archaeology or historical curiosity, it is about reuniting with faith. Because if the miracle happened, then the God who worked there continues to work, and that includes you. Faith stops being an idea and becomes something that touches your life now, in the present. That woman's story becomes a mirror. The little you have today could be enough in God's hands. This type of discovery makes us stop and think. If this miracle had a real place, how many others also did? And why have so many of these places been forgotten, silenced, erased? This shows that there is a purpose in rediscovering them now. It's as if the story is calling us back to the roots of faith, reminding us that all this really happened. And what's more, it could still happen. If all of this is making sense to you, if it is affecting your faith, your view of the Bible, I want you to comment below. The same God as Elisha still works today, or I believe in the miracles of the Bible. Your interaction shows that you are connected to this truth and helps this message reach more people. Stay with me, because the next step will show you something even deeper about this place and what it can reveal for our time. And you? Do you believe that this place really exists? That it is still there, hidden under layers of earth and oblivion? Or do you think that all of this was just a symbol, a story told to illustrate a spiritual principle without any link to geographic reality? This is a question that needs to be asked, and even more so, it needs to be answered honestly, because at this point in the video, after everything that has been presented, after exploring the biblical descriptions, the archaeological evidence, the physical remains, the ancient records, and even the historical omissions that seem to have left this place deliberately forgotten. It is no longer possible to say that we are just dealing with a legend. The pieces are falling into place. The signs are clear. And the connection between the sacred text and the excavated soil is too strong to ignore. We are not talking here about loose theories or baseless speculation. We are talking about evidence of real, published, documented discoveries. Fragments of vases, inscriptions, agricultural structures compatible with the Elisha period, accurately dated by carbon-14. We are talking about a village that, although small, had cultural, economic and religious characteristics that coincide with the biblical narrative of 2 Kings chapter 4. Of course, there will be those who will continue to say that this is all just a coincidence, that faith does not need proof, that miracles cannot be studied with scientific methodology. But you who are here watching up to this point have already noticed that something bigger is happening, that we are living in a time of rediscovery with the foundations of faith. A time when archaeology, history, and spiritual revelation are intersecting again, bringing to light the lost places mentioned in the Bible. If this video impacted you in some way, if at any point you felt your faith being awakened, your understanding being expanded, or simply that inner certainty that the Bible is still alive, then this is the place for you. This channel was created exactly for this. For those who believe that biblical accounts are not just ancient stories but parts of a truth that is still being revealed, place by place, trace by trace. If you've come this far, it's not by chance. Few people watch a video until the end. And those who do, it's because they're thirsty for more. So take the opportunity now to subscribe to the channel. Here we will continue unearthing the secrets of the Bible, exploring the lost places of Scripture, crossing archaeological discoveries with prophecies, with faith, with revelations that were ignored for centuries. You won't want to miss out on what's to come. And if you made it to the end, comment below. I was impacted by this truth. It may seem simple, but this comment shows that you are part of this awakening community. It also helps YouTube deliver this content to more people who, like you, are looking for answers and deeper connections with the Word. So, subscribe, activate the bell, leave your comment, and be with us in the next videos. The next mystery is closer than you think.